by one, go around the room and introduce yourself and the company you're with. Starting over here.
Oscar Medina. I'm with Siemens Healthineers. I'm based out of Waltham, Massachusetts. He's outside of Boston.
Great. Welcome.
Martha Reina with Centro Cibernetico USA in Boston.
Welcome, Martha.
Laura Gibbons, I'm with the Hackett Group, and I'm based out of Los Angeles.
Hackett from LA.
Yeah.
Any fires?
I've been home in a couple of weeks.
I'm afraid to open my refrigerator. With power outages, I'm afraid to see what's growing inside.
Power, though.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. So I'm Harry Ronaldson. I work for TradeShift, and I'm the PR director in London.
Laura?
Laura Ahern, I work for TradeShift based out of headquarters in San Francisco, and I'm Chief of Staff to our CEO.
Okay.
I'm Duncan Jones from Forrester Research.
Dan Bigos, Chain IQ, right across the river in Jersey City.
Great to have you here. How about you?
Laura Bismar, I'm Corning Incorporated.
Corning? I love your glass.
Dina Dent, also Corning.
Great to have you here.
Steve Broad with Emphasis based out of Dallas.
Oh, Emphasis.
CRF&A.
Sure, okay.
Glennis Smithy,
Ralph
Ralph Lauren.
Lauren, okay.
Ron Pepper, Ralph Lauren.
Great.
Joe Phillips, UPS.
UPS, okay. Level, okay. Okay.
Major Bottoms also a local research.
Wow, they're cornering the market, okay.
Hi, Ellen Long, 71 pounds.
Welcome, folks. And we have Amy Moore back here. So one of the things that I heard is the role of people in change, in process. And so we thought spend a little bit of time talking about, might have to do something. There we go. How do we use people most effectively and give them the opportunity to do more with what they have at their disposal? So we just had the introductions. I asked the question, what is it that we are walking away with as of today? Hopefully tomorrow there's plenty more that's going to give us food for thought. Show of hands though, how many here have launched an AI, a machine learning, a digitization initiative in their organizations? Okay, great. For those that haven't, how many are looking for such an opportunity? So it's either you are looking for the opportunity or you already have. Technology is only one part of the solution. The other part is people. So if we can gather, I have some pens and paper here, and if we can gather in, say, groups of 4, just get together and draw up a list of those qualifications that you think are important for talent necessary to be able to achieve that journey, to go down the digitization path, then are those roles? Are they specific positions? Or are those competencies? In other words, you might have some people that are involved with digitization, but they are not allocated specifically to that. And then on another piece of paper, how are you going to go about resourcing that skill base? So I have some paper here, and if we could just like divvy up in groups of 4, that'd be fantastic. There's some over here as well. You can pass it around. Yep. Great.
Yep. What do you need from here?
Just pass that around. And here's some paper over here, guys. I think there's a pen. There's a stack right there. Pen. And back here. There you go, and a pen. And one, yeah, you could join this group here. That'd be great. And if you could perhaps join one of these groups over here, that'd be fine. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to give you about 5 to 7 minutes to come up with a list. What's that? You need more millenniums? Yeah.
What quality might a millennial have that would be attractive?
I'd say curiosity.
Yeah.
And make sure you capture how you're going to resource for those roles. How are you going to find them? All righty. So we're going to share with everybody what we came up with, starting with the roles and the qualifications, and then how we're going to fill them. So who would like to start? All right.
Well, we go first. She'll go first. Okay, so we came up with the following qualifications. Open-minded, that would be at the top of our list.
Okay.
The willingness to change, which is also a competency. Process improvement background, maybe we start digging into that qualification. Then like a person that's able or being able to communicate business needs, that like and understand technology and understand best practices.
Great. How are you going to find them?
So how? So the first thing is we're going to look inside our organization and probably do a competency assessment and see if there's, what that gap is. I may have people that are closer to filling those roles that we came up with. So first inside, and then if we cannot find them inside, even after deciding if we're going to be involving training or the competency gap, addressing that, we're also going to look outside. So social media sites, LinkedIn, Indeed, and reaching out to headhunters that could help us find those resources.
Thank you much.
You're welcome.
How about over here?
Okay, so we have a couple things. This is fun. One is critical thinking. So someone who can do some deep critical thinking, is curious, has an entrepreneurial spirit, understands the art of possibility of technology, and is willing to challenge the limits. A deep understanding of client needs and understanding of client digital transformation journeys. What else? There was a great example that Duncan gave, if anyone watches HDTV, kind of a combination of Chip and Joanna. So Joanna has the vision. She sees the design, and Chip says, this is realistic, this is not. So kind of complementing both aspects. And then the second part, how we would go find it, LinkedIn, using our own networks, and then also another suggestion to consider outsourcing or managed services.
Great. Great. Thank you very much. This group.
Okay, some of the same themes. We wanted, in terms of competencies, we're looking for people who are agile, they have agility, they're future thinking, they embrace and they're change enablers, visionaries, have a key trait of adaptability, since change is constant. They are strategic thinking, they're outcome oriented, they can serve as business translators, they are digital/tech savvy, and analytical in their thinking. And then we did some traditional roles like change management folks, project management folks, so we went from competencies to some baseline kind of roles. And then in terms of how will we source them, how will we get them? We talked about having an internal playbook to build these skills and competencies, so looking at the talent within our existing organization, similar to the other groups. But then also really spending a lot of time, curating strategic partnerships for talent pools where they'll have, and the talent pools will have passive talent, job seekers and have active job seekers, and keep a good blend so that they're there when we need them. And then when we have an immediate demand, we have a good place to go to, partnerships that have the talent with the right skills. Then we talk about early curation of talent and a longer run pool for internships, early pipeline building. And then we talked about not just a human piece for sourcing, but also digital FTE sourcing, leveraging our procurement folks to get us good deals on AI and RPA, and not forgetting that part of the workforce that'll be digital FTEs.
Great. Last but not least, this group.
So I won't repeat a lot of what was already said, But for the first question, we said one of the qualifications you needed was someone who was IT professional, so someone who knew what the technology was needed to complete the digital transformation project. Someone else who was a project manager with expertise in agile methods, project methods. A project architect who would provide the framework for production. You also needed executive leadership and buy-in to push any sort of big project across an organization, a change management team, and a budget manager. Those are all different roles, I guess. And
It is enable-based.
how you would get those resources. We didn't talk too much on this just because we were running out of time, but one different thing that we touched on was reaching out to consultancies, so looking to outside expertise and bringing that in. And I think everything else was said by other groups.
Thank you very much. So the collective mind here is painted a picture of a path that we're going to go down together. So what we found was that there are some core hard skills that are absolutely essential. We also heard that there are some soft skills that were essential. I heard that there is a balance between what internal capabilities are, what external capabilities are, and that's split into two different buckets. One might be through a consultancy or an outsourced provider. The other one might be what's out in the open market. There might be passive talent, there might be active talent, which are some of the things that we're going to be covering here this afternoon. Times are changing. One of the things that was identified by Gartner is that the #1 challenge facing CIOs today, 54% of them said it's recruiting. So, show of hands, how many people have their recruiting processes locked down? No, completely optimized. You're good to go. If so, please talk to me. So let's have a conversation afterwards.
I don't own recruiting, but we have a large engine recruiting that's what I need.
That fills the roles that you need. Great. You're fortunate, and whatever you're doing, let's have a conversation because I need to repeat it. More specifically, the demand for robotics, AI, data scientists, all of these cause consternation for those of us that go to find talent on a daily basis. If you type into Glassdoor, for the last 3 years, the hottest job that's out there, the hottest roles, we're talking about it right now. This is music to my ears. The conversation earlier today with Genpact and Levi's, they used the word bilingualism. I had another word up there, but it's in essence the same thing. PwC found that it is the combination of creativity, leadership, emotional intelligence, all of those soft skills that some of you talked about, that leads to success in a side-by-side relationship between technology and people. So the question is from a long-term planning perspective, how do we bring those together? What are the skills that are required to be able to effectively unify the two in a hybrid between technology and people? There was a recent article, for those of you that saw it, just a few days ago in Fortune that had an amazing, a perfect illustration of what a journey might look like. So MassMutual, large insurance company, found back in 2013 that there's some significant issues around fraud. So they recognized, what the FBI recognized, that they're being set back significantly, as are their policyholders, because of fraud. Fast forward, they launched an initiative between data scientists and those folks that are on the front lines to address it. They created a role, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, translators between the analysts, the data analysts, and those people that are touching data on a day-to-day basis. If you're in payables, if you're responsible at Ralph Lauren for making sure the bills get paid, those on your team and those individuals that are actually working with the technology behind the scenes, behind the curtain, they sought to team up to be able to come up with a program together to solve for this problem. It went company-wide. In the process of doing this, they found that not only were they able to solve for some of those core problems around fraud, that same process, they found other opportunities for savings to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, not just as relates to fraud, but also areas that might be more closely tied to G&A. It was literacy that they found to be the huge issue. Literacy had not caught up with executives. They had not caught up with the individuals that are using the data on a daily basis. So what does that bridge look like? Again, data translators might be where it's at. Harvard Business Review cited an article that talked about some of McKinsey's research. In the year 2026, there's going to be a need for 2 to 4 million data translators. Let's go back to what was said on stage a little earlier today. These are the individuals that are the bilingualists. These are the individuals that have the ability to bridge that gap, the chasm, between the technology itself and the day-to-day work that people actually engage in. They found that the technology didn't necessarily replace people. It enabled people. So, as was also mentioned earlier today, they set out to not identify ways to cut jobs using technology. They set out to find a way to eliminate or identify and then eliminate fraud. In doing so, they found the opportunity to identify tens of millions of dollars in opportunities and savings that they otherwise wouldn't have had if not for this initiative. So again, the augmentation of the human brain with the abilities of technology. So, I'm a psych degree grad, right out of a liberal arts school. Show of hands, how many others have liberal arts degrees? So about half the room. How many of you have a background in technology? Only a couple. Good news is, for all of those that are out of liberal arts programs, you're needed. You're highly needed. So you have a job tomorrow, which is good news. It's how you develop a literacy around the technology that matters. For those of you that graduate with a degree in technology, it's a literacy of what happens on the job that matters. So how then do organizations work together to identify those gaps for training? McKinsey set out to address that. They have some really bright people internally that are doing analysis. They have some really bright people that are actually client engaging, that know how to communicate, know how to sell, and rack up tremendous fees because they do great work. It was leveraging those two, bringing them together. They established an academy that actually is generating over 1,000 individuals. MassMutual teamed up with 5 universities, all East Coast, Amherst among others, to crank out a program that generates and graduates these hybrid talent-based individuals. As it says, algorithms only teach you or can only tell you part of what's going on behind the scenes. You need people to solve those problems. MIT found that you could hire, you could rent, and you could cultivate the talent. You might not be able to do that purely internally. You might not be able to do that externally as well. So for those individuals, I asked the question, how would you find it? We heard the answer in the room. It's a combination of the two. Those organizations that are directly focused on developing talent that they already have double the output of effective use of talent than those that don't. So you might actually have the talent within your organization already. The question is what are you doing to cultivate them to better understand literacy for the other side of the chasm? We need a people-first approach. There's a recent article, an interview with Sumitra Duda in Wharton's Knowledge podcast. And he called out 3 specific things that we need to make sure that we keep perpetually in front of us as a true north. 1, that we use technology not because it exists, not because we have a hammer, but because it helps us help individuals. We have to provide more support than we have before in reskilling and helping individuals transition across jobs. That might be between, say, payables to a technology organization and or vice versa. When organizations deploy AI internally, they need to work on processes and systems that explicitly work on the focus on people first. It's that human agency first approach that is going to get the most out of your investment tied to digitization. So, what is AI talent? The CEO, the Chief Strategy Officer of Dialpad has a lot to say about it. It's all relevant. As does the VP of Data Science at HackerRank. A lot of this is quite technical. Further, the Data Science Manager at Zendesk also talks about really specific technical things that might make an effect on performance for their data scientists. And it's sort of the same thing that the VP of Emerging Practices at Teradata says as well. There's a lot of stuff here, guys. But in your groups right now, the same groups that you were in, you have an opportunity. The opportunity is this. Each of you can take a 6-month sabbatical, providing that you find somebody that could step in and fill your shoes for those 6 months. If they do their job really well, congratulations, you're going to come back to a promotion, more money, and a better role, something that you want. If they don't do well, you're going to be given the opportunity to put stuff in a box. So, the question I have for you are, what are the 3 most important responsibilities that the person has to fulfill to do your job and do it well? Going back to the competencies, what are they? We sort of had that discussion, but this gets real now. This is your job. This is your future. And then what questions would you ask to determine whether or not they could do those? I'm going to give you 10 minutes in your group to come up with that. Any questions? Have at it.
Cool, that's tricky. Sum it up. Okay.
And for those of you that are newly joining us, just hop in one of the other groups, and I would love to hear your thoughts as well.
I feel like our answers might be a little different, right?
I mean, I would probably sum mine up as it's all knowledge based. So effectively, it's knowledge of what the company is doing, knowledge of what conversations are happening externally, and the ability to find a point of relevance between the two. That's a bit vague, though.
Yeah.
It's quite high.
Yeah, I'm trying to zoom out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what if they were already a sales director and somewhere else in the organization so that they knew the process and understood the organization? Right.
I mean, maybe the thing that might unite us all is this ability to know who to ask. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I call, like, as chief of staff, people are like, what do you do? That's the most ambiguous job title ever. And I'm always air traffic control because of my relationships and knowledge of the business. I know who to point to who, and that's just from having been at the company for enough time to understand that a little bit.
yeah, and I'm kind of finding that as someone who's come from external to internal quite quickly. It's a thing that I can probably do all the things that I did before.
Yeah.
But I don't know who to ask anymore.
Yeah.
Because I only had one person to ask before.
But we could program a chat
Yes.
to do that.
Yeah.
If if it watched you for long enough, it would learn and understand the question. Oh, we're asking about that, therefore we move this.
It could literally just see how I categorize emails in my inbox, right? To just say, okay, that's.
And how you route things.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
then you could train it to say,
Yeah.
okay, no, you thought it should be allocated to him, but actually I haven't known it should be allocated to her. And so if somehow the knowledge could be extracted.
Yeah.
You should get Christian to make you one.
Maybe then I could go on vacation. But I had written down relationships being one of them. Like I think there's certain relationships that you couldn't. I would like to believe a bot could not replace, and I think there's the human side and how to have a hard conversation with someone versus someone else, and knowing the nuances of that. And yeah.
What about for another responsibility? What about not only managing for current clients, but building sources for clients and opportunities?
If somebody was working here, they could fulfill that role of going out and meeting prospects. So,
But again, it goes back to 6 months from now. Are you going to be getting a promotion, or are you going to be told?
what would you have to do to train up? If somebody who works for you, what would you have to do to train them up to fulfill employee?
Who's ready for a sabbatical?
Are there certain processes that you would need to teach?
What would they not know?
I guess just the nuances of what I do specifically, like who to target, how to target, competencies, other things. Every sales is sales. Everything you sell is so different that there's always an attack plan, no matter what you're selling.
There's a lot of technology available to help salespeople do that targeting. Some vendors have a very formal plan for how do you qualify.
5 more minutes.
Okay, based on the characteristics. If it's this type, then you go this way.
I guess it's more so just learning the industry. Like if someone else was already in like that would almost be
so they would need to know the terminology and
they need to walk the trades. They have to be in your world. Like you can take the best sales rep.
Let me show you a mess.
If they don't know certain procurement and sourcing jargon and little words that make people's ears tickle, right?
How's everybody doing?
Let alone second they couldn't fill in.
Close?
If it's not specific to my job, I'm not going to do it. Just like I couldn't do that.
Close?
Not even.
No, okay.
It's quite a tough question.
Well, I've been replaced by a bot, so.
There you go.
I think Duncan is systematically replacing us
Hey,
all by machines.
if they do a better job than you, you got promoted, you're going to get more money.
Yeah, I mean, it's about the relationships. I think for me, like, you can't.
Okay,
You can
good.
blag it to a certain extent, but I think the kind of understanding that you have to bring, I have to understand what's going on in the market because I then have to translate what we want to say.
They're going to be working on it just a minute or two more, but let's start with this group right here.
It's very close.
Do we have the cube?
Yeah. Then I have to find some point of relevancy between what journalists.
What'd you find?
Okay, so one of the challenges we had with identifying the 3 most important responsibilities is that we all play different roles in our organization. But we came up with listening for understanding or active listening, collaboration and co-creation, and adaptability, having a vision for the art of the possible.
Like that. Okay. And for the second point?
For the second point, we said we need a leader, a strategic thinker, and someone who can empower people, delegate and steer, and adaptable.
Okay. And finally?
We said we had more questions than one here. Give examples of when you led a team through the art of possible. Situation where you failed and how you recovered. Share an example of transformation versus incremental advancement.
So not just warming up the water, but actually changing the state that it's in.
I think one of the questions that we had here was, changing the state that it's in. One of the questions that we had here is, how big does somebody see incremental? How big does somebody see transformation?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because that can make a difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then last was, what's your view on transformation?
Great. In the back.
So similar to their dilemma, we also all play relatively different roles at our organizations. But we found that the common threads that we all share are that we have to build a relationship with clients and manage that relationship, and also build a pipeline for bringing in new potential business, and project management, so managing your projects. And as far as applying the competencies for what criteria they'd have to meet, one is definitely knowledge. They have to be willing to learn and tackle new things, and being adaptable into new areas. And they also have to be technologically literate. Then we also said that they have to have job complexity, so they have to drive change at their organization.
And reading, weird handwriting.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely one of the key ones. Supervision, and we value process supervision over people.
Okay.
So managing your own projects. And we also said experience, and it's not necessarily always a necessity.
Okay.
And then for number 3, our key question was, what is your biggest past business success? Just to get into their mind and how they think about that success and what drove that win and how they were able to accomplish it. And then just being able to see some of the challenges that they saw in that success as well.
Fantastic, thank you. How about this group up here? Yeah, I'm not going to throw.
Thank you. Okay, so we play a scenario here that I was going to be covering for Rhonda, and the 3 top things that she's asked me to be responsible for: monitoring the invoicing and payment process from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. So make sure that got until the payment was out. And then supervising the team to make sure that they were also following through on all the invoices and payments. And pay attention to the hot payment list, because those were things that were that need to be addressed on a daily basis. Okay. As far as knowledge, they want knowledge in accounts payable, at least 15-year experience. Somebody that thinks outside the box and can resolve conflict, and experience with SAP. So very, very specific there. And the questions that they were asking me was to give real life scenarios, and specifically how I dealt with success versus one that I screwed up and how I fixed it, and how do I deal with stress.
There's no stress.
No, when you have a tequila bottle, of course not.
And you, Laura.
Okay. So ultimately, we're going to need to talk more at drinks, because we didn't get too far.
Okay.
But a couple themes that came up.
She has tequila.
Perfect. Couple things that came up were the fact that some of us do feel that it'd be hard to replace us, and the nuances and the relationships and the very kind of special things that we own seem irreplaceable, but when you zoom out, there are, as Duncan suggested, technological aspects that could be sort of outsourced of what you do every day. For instance, what did you say about the bot? Maybe add some color.
Well, a lot of it is knowing the organization and who to ask and who to route people to. So it would be very difficult for someone to come in and understand how to navigate the organization, but it might be possible for the person going on sabbatical to somehow train a bot to route things to help the new hire navigate. You know, if you could somehow capture the rules or the logic with a bit of prep, that was just the idea. But to come in and know how to navigate the organization, that was what we were all struggling with.
Okay. I don't know about you. I heard a reoccurring theme in this little discussion as well as the one from before, and that is it's the soft skills that enable us to go on a sabbatical. It's the soft skills that allow us to navigate the organization. It's the soft skills that allow us to deal with people. It's the soft skills that allow us to connect the dots and see the opportunity to identify the challenges. The technical acumen in the job itself is absolutely essential to be able to do the job, but to have success in role probably requires a pretty in-depth understanding of people. So the EQ perhaps over the IQ. Let's talk about defining roles. We threw out a word sort of loosely called competencies. Mirrored to that, though, is the word behavior. So I have the pleasure of leading talent acquisition for TradeShift. And we are going through a journey on our own, and it's been a load of fun. The question is what does success look like in role? What are the competencies required to do that job? And then ultimately, what are the behaviors that can show success around the competencies, and at what level? Competency addresses three dimensions: ability, knowledge, and skill. Ability is not necessarily something that you train on. There's a natural predisposition. It's something that might be more innate. It's something that you show up to the job with. Knowledge itself, it can be developed over time. The relationship between that and behavior is the manifestation of the competency. However, similar to competency, there are things that you show up with, including beliefs, your attitude, and your action. Beliefs, again, might be innate. It's what you hold true. It's the way you look at the world, your views. Your attitude is directly affected by the culture, by the organization that you find yourself. And then ultimately, the action is the outcome that can be measured. The challenge is, with AI, with machine learning, they could pick up bots. There are roles. We can actually schedule interviews with a bot. I was talking with one head of HR that said he spoke with a candidate. The candidate did not know that they were corresponding with a bot. The bot had a name. Her name was Sally. And Sally was really good at orchestrating interviews in a very tightly defined way. The challenge is he had to fire Sally because Sally didn't understand how to navigate the complexity. There are all kinds of buzzwords like we saw a few slides ago on the definition of what a good hire might look like around AI. I would highly suggest that we steer clear of buzzwords. Words like computer science fundamentals are really important, but at the end of the day, they narrow your search down. Ultimately, these individuals are going to have to be able to understand business problems. Just because you can code, just because you understand algorithms, doesn't mean that you understand the complexity of the work that's going on in payables. You might be able to identify a solution for part of it, but it's not going to displace the entire function. Do they have the ability to write the entire system? Probably not. If you do, we're looking for individuals. Please let me know. What's going to be really important is that they understand the system, those relationships between people. And again, these are individuals. They aren't necessarily driven purely by compensation, despite what might be out there. The typical AI, the data scientist in the Bay Area goes for over $300,000 a year. That's normal. You can't compete purely based on compensation. There is an organization in the city, a database organization headquartered in the city, that now pays, including grants, over $1 million a year to these individuals. You aren't going to compete on compensation alone. Your success might be found in tying what they're doing to a mission that might matter, tying what they're doing to the opportunity to make a significant contribution. Their capacity to be able to marry up what they know with a mission. So if you could frame the opportunity that you have as having meaning, having a mission, that's worth a good portion of compensation. Oops, sorry about that, guys. So who mentioned passive talent? Not all talent's looking, period. 75% is not. That 75% are highly engaged in what they're doing. They love their job. They're indeed passive. And those that are looking are gone in a nanosecond, particularly data scientists. So what does that mean? 12% are actually looking, 13% are casually looking. Of the balance, the passive, 15% would respond to an outreach through a friend, your personal network. 45% are open to a conversation with a recruiter, but that's only a conversation. 15% you can't touch at all. So going back to the question, what is it that you're looking for to replace you so you can go on a sabbatical? The individuals that you're looking for, chances are not looking, statistically, are not looking for a job. So how are you going to reach out to them? How are you going to identify them? You're not going to sell them on cash. You're going to sell them on opportunity. Maybe an opportunity to go on a sabbatical. But you're going to sell them on the opportunity itself. Then there's this thing called the bilingual translator. Again, we talked about it a little bit ago. Somebody, the bilinguist, a translator is perhaps the most important job in a digital change, in a transformation that is beyond a step change. These are individuals that can identify the opportunities and the business case. They work with the business leaders. They can prioritize to identify the opportunities. They collect data, but beyond collecting the data, they are able to identify the data needed. So I heard somebody talking earlier about collecting data. We heard Rolf talk about collecting data. These are the individuals that can see through the data to identify what's most meaningful to the business. They're able to build the analytics engine to ensure that what is being solved for is interpreted by the business, by the users. They're able to validate and derive business implications for that data. And then finally, they're able to implement solutions and execute on insights. How many people in the room know of such a person in your organization? They might not be wearing the hat that says bilingualist or translator, but how many people in the room have such a creature that they work with. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, so they're there. We have these people. The question is what are we doing to cultivate them and cultivate more? Going back to the slide that I shared a little bit ago, we're going to be needing 2 to 4 million of these individuals by the year 2026.
So there seems to be a huge gulf. There seems to be a huge gulf between step 3 and 4 in that in the chart, which you sort of gloss over. Building the analytics engine can identify the correlation, but it needs a very different skill and a lot of effort to identify the causation behind that correlation, and you kind of ignore that.
So you're exactly it. And there's more. We could have there's a whole lot more behind it. So we have these two camps, right? We have the individuals that are knee-deep in the business itself, right? They're the ones that are in the weeds of the job of whether it be payables or receivables or whatever it is. They're the ones that have the institutional wisdom that they've been carrying for 20 years, right? We have those individuals that understand how data can be derived. The reality is they don't talk to one another. There's the slide that I was going to with the light bulb sort of addresses that. And so we're going to come back to that now. How many people are familiar with Doug Hall, ideation guru? There was a Fortune magazine a few years ago cover of a guy wearing a Hawaiian t-shirt with a light bulb in his mouth. There are some people who say, yeah, I remember that. I've seen that. He is a guy that ran or still runs Eureka Ranch, which again is an ideation facility and program that threw out an equation that I absolutely love. Breakthrough ideas, the light bulb, are the result of a stimulus, whether it be internal or external. It could be the consulting firm. It could be an internal subject matter expert in an organization that is able to turn the reality of perception sufficiently to change perspective. So, same data, how do you ask the question? What's the right question? These are professionals of asking the question why. These are professionals that ask the question how, and then marry up the two. So, breakthrough ideas equal stimulus, S, capital S, raised to the exponential power of diversity. It's diversity of thought, it's diversity of profession, it's race, it's gender, it's big company, it's small company, it's political persuasion, it's ethnicity, it's across the board. It's level within the organization, it's IT, so it's the hands-on practitioner that's up to their knees. It's the individual coming out of a engineering computer science program at Carnegie Mellon that might tap on top of that, has a data science program from Stanford. So somebody that understands code. It's bringing them together in the room at the same time to have the discussion. So breakthrough ideas are the result of a stimulus raised to the exponential power of diversity, divided by, here's the buzzkill, fear times ego. You don't understand we're different. My bonus isn't tied to that. My boss won't like it. We have our own secret sauce. We've already tried it. It didn't work. We went through a transformational journey before and we fell flat on our face. Fear times ego. You double the denominator and you cut the breakthrough ideas in half. You can control the diversity. It's a choice. Who do you bring to the table? So coming back to the question between 3 and 4, one key question is who are you even bringing into the conversation? And part of the problem is we are so myopically focused on AI or on automation or on lean transformation that we are focused on. We bring in the experts on process without bringing experts on the process that's going to be transformed. So we need to marry them up together. Breakthrough ideas are a result of an internal stimulus or external raised to the exponential power of diversity divided by fear times ego. So you need a senior analyst or a senior AI individual, right? over the years, I've used a few different retained firms to find talent. Heidrick & Struggles pretty good at what they do, and they found that 61% of the organizations right now are looking for individuals to lead this type of change over the next 2 years. What they found, though, was that in order to be able to fulfill their talent demands, they had to step outside of their industry sometimes. Knee-jerk reaction. A hiring manager comes to me saying, Eric, I need somebody to lead engineering to do X, Y, Z. My knee-jerk reaction is, okay, great, I'm going to another P2P organization. I'm going to go to another database organization. I'm going to go to another organization that looks and smells like us. The reality is, as Heidrick & Struggles points out here, it might not necessarily be somebody out of analogous organization. It might be in a parallel industry. So I would encourage you, again, going back to that equation of the big D, there's value in bringing in talent that's outside of your space. It forces you to think differently. LinkedIn, so this is, I just want to be able to show a point of comparison. May 2018, LinkedIn listed 8,300 jobs with the words artificial intelligence. This past weekend, I did the same search, and there are 17,900, and that's just in the US. So the demand in 1 year has more than doubled for the exact same skill set. I would propose that the talent that we might need potentially comes from within as opposed to externally. Earlier, I also mentioned the $300,000 price tag on talent. It's not necessarily the money that is going to drive people to your organization. It's the opportunity for the step change, for the stage change, as opposed to simply the incremental heating up of the water. So, a few questions. In your organization, what are the requisite competencies for success? Do you even know what they are? I know of organizations in the room that actually do use a set of OKRs to drive an aligned organization. The question I have for you is, do you even know what they are? And can you tie performance for your team to those OKRs? Does industry really matter? Perhaps a change of perspective, turning of the prism is potentially more important than somebody that comes out of your own background. Degree. How many organizations here require a degree? Show of hands. Okay. In the past year, Google, Facebook have all killed them. They don't require degrees anymore. Apple doesn't require a degree anymore. Right? There you go. Why don't they require degrees? In some cases, it's what we just talked about, the soft skills. What matters more, in many cases, are individuals that have the ability to affect change in organizations and between people, to be able to communicate more effectively. You're talking to a proponent of technology in my craft, in what I do in recruiting. I'm a huge proponent of it. I also recognize that perhaps the most disruptive thing of all is to be human. I gave a presentation in Singapore a few years ago, and there was a gentleman that sat sort of where you are, and I asked the room, what is the most disruptive thing you could possibly do to be disruptive in sourcing talent? And the guy, he shot up his hand, this was before the Cambridge Analytica days, said, well, if you know the hiring manager likes cats, you could search for people on Facebook, you could scrape Facebook to identify cat lovers so that you could actually marry them up and they're going to have a tighter conversation when they actually interview. I said, congratulations, you're out of a job. What you just described was an algorithm. If you can distill the job to an algorithm, there is opportunity. There is opportunity for digitization, for AI. The question is, what is it that people do that's beyond the algorithm? The most disruptive thing of all is, as I would maintain, is to be human. How do we use technology to enable people to be more human? How do we use technology to enable people to actually do what they are best at? A moment ago, we talked about technology, about compensation. Again, ask yourself, what is your organization doing, and what can you do individually as leaders in your organization to just simply redefine the language around impact? Your budget is your budget is your budget. The likelihood of you're getting $1 million to hire a data scientist tomorrow is probably kind of low. Your ability to reframe the opportunity is really high. So what is it that you can do to reframe the opportunity? Location. I wrestle with this. I love having co-located teams. The reality is one of the most productive individuals on my team lives in a cabin in the woods. How many organizations here actually overtly choose people that can live elsewhere? 1, 2, 3. Well, so you have, Infosys is kind of a large organization. Your team, where are they? Just randomly, where are the individuals? Poland, India, Atlanta. Okay. Globally disparate team, right? Globally dispersed. Going back to the conversation of the light bulb and disparate ideas, I would suggest that having individuals that are sometimes outside of the day-to-day work environment actually is stimulating to the organization. So a few final thoughts. Benioff was interviewed for a book by Nancy Duarte. Said, "We need a new generation of executives who understand how to manage and lead through data. We also need a new generation of employees who are better able to organize and structure a business around that data." She goes one step further and suggests that the opportunity is amongst us. We have the ability to manage from the middle as opposed to purely top down. We have the opportunity amongst us to have an impact on those individuals that come into our organization. However, we need the ability to be able to provide perspective. MRIs, as she says, shows that telling a story based on data lights up the brain. Dyslexia. Managing MRI images show that telling a story based on data lights up the brain in a way that data alone can't match. Data is useless without human experience and judgment. If we relied solely on machines to make decisions, they'd be all the wrong ones. In her book, she talks about storytelling. What is the storytelling that can occur through data? What story is the data telling us? To what degree are we enabling people to tell the story? To what degree are we cultivating the ability among our teams to look at data and look for the story behind it? So, now that we've been in small groups, let's bring our minds together. The question I have for you is, what are those tangible next steps that you in your own organizations can do immediately come Monday? I'm curious. I'd love to hear from you. What can you do immediately to affect your organization's ability to identify and attract and cultivate the best talent that's going to lead you through disruption? Anyone? You had some good ideas over here.
We do a lot of cross-training within the area, so all of our eggs are not in one basket.
Fantastic. Tell me more.
So within, we have like 3, 4 areas, 5 total, in voice processing, We have invoice processing for retail, the payment team, and analysts. And we have lease accounting and Ariba support. So we are cross-training those people from the different teams to build bench strength. In case something happens, some fallout, we can easily move somebody around.
Fantastic. So you are cross-pollinating
Yes.
individuals, okay? Turning the prism,
Yes.
okay? Who else? Corning.
One of the things, when we talked about the passive pipeline, I think, you know, we actually, in some fields, it's hard to get talent in the right location around the world. So people are having to get very creative with targeted rotations around the world and really managing the visa process and giving targeted experience where they're going to have the right mix, right skills to, for us to have them over the long run. So really getting creative on, I would say, international students and candidates, right, and finding a path to long-term employment for them, you know, that's a tough one.
That is a tough one, but it also sounds like you're acknowledging the fact that international disparity is a good thing as well,
Yeah.
which is wonderful to hear. One more. How about from the back? Do you have one?
I'll just flip it around. I'm kind of on the other side. So an observation, I've got a business that has no employees.
Okay.
We did that on purpose 17 years ago. It's a management consulting firm. And what we're seeing the most right now from our clients is that they're recognizing the need to have kind of an ecosystem of talent. And so they're bringing us in as interims from the executive level on down to manager level. It's more strategic. It's not kind of a staff augmentation function. It's more, hey, we've got a gap or we're trying to fill a hole somewhere around the world, and we want this very specific expertise, and we've got 1,200 people around the world. If it's not in the network, we'll tell you that, but then we'll offer to go find it for you if that's what you want. So we're seeing that accelerating right now, probably in the last 3 years.
How much of it is around digitization initiatives?
You know, it's not, if I had put a number on it, I'd say maybe a quarter of it.
Okay.
And where we see it there, it's a lot around the soft skills. It's around, you know, how do you lead the PMO? How do you help augment a team member that, you know, maybe we want to help build capability and skills that they don't have, but we want them to be part of the organization, so we'll actually match them up with the right person. And I think one of the biggest things is just, you know, we talked about it earlier, but there's such a talent gap. The labor market's so tight right now that everyone recognizes it takes 6 to 12 months to find the right kind of person. And you don't have that luxury of waiting 6 to 12 months any longer.
You're absolutely right. Any others? Okay. So, just to recap, I'm not here to help you define your AI strategy, your digitization strategy. There are a lot of bright minds here that are probably prepared to help you have that conversation. But it's really important to actually define one. Where is your ship headed? And based on that, then you could define the competencies and behaviors needed to fulfill that strategy. But if you don't have an idea where your ship is headed, the likelihood of your getting there is probably pretty low. And having the team to pull it off is even lower. Engage translators. Engage those individuals that you already have to help amp up, to speed up that transformation process. If you don't have them identified, create the opportunities to cross-pollinate. Bring those individuals together, those teams that are highly disparate. Those individuals that touch data, that engage data, can find data to those that actually use it, and they're going to use that data to make more informed decisions. So drive that collaboration between the teams. You set me up for that. Thank you very much. And get outside the box. What's that?
One of the things you didn't talk about is, you know, us going for the talent, right? Making sure we have a pipeline and all that. But what about making sure you have the right type of culture in the organization for them to do the pull effect? So the right culture, working space, and then what you put on the slide, which was interesting to say, what's the purpose-driven piece? What's the salary? What's the package? And then what mission and purpose, right? So all of those soft things that is not related to the jobs, the skills, but you can attract them because you have a purpose that they have some type of stickiness to, or you can attract them because your work culture is amazing, like the Workday example that you hear about all the time. What about those things? Is that 25% of the package? How should we be preparing that if everything else is right, the salary package is right, the location is right, what else should we be trying to do?
And I'll add on to that too, does that also change from millenniums to people our age?
That's a fantastic question. They're both awesome. And for both of you, I would love to have a conversation on what it means, what does opportunity mean for one set of individuals, and what is the relationship of culture to opportunity. How many of you would want to go to work for an organization that enables you, in fact, encourages you to bring your whole self? That actually wants your brains engaged, that wants you to bring a piece of heart to your job, and trusts you to take bold action. How many here would be interested in that type of environment? Come to Trade Shift. So, I love that question because that's who we were really deliberate and we spent some time looking inside. Who are we? What matters to us? What matters to, I'm going to look for a shifter out there, but randomly, what matters to all of us? And it's that. The way I go about doing it is different than Laura. Martin stepped out. The way he goes about it is different. Ron, we're all different. But there's the expectation that we all can make magic happen. We have a product that's intelligent. We have a product that's human. We are expected to show up with guts, and our product is bold. So how important is it? It's everything.
Yeah, and the funny part is if you guys don't help me get through this deployment, I will need a job.
There you go. So, but when I go back to, remember the one slide where we talk about the opportunity and reframing the impact? That's exactly what we just did, right? We didn't talk, and what I just shared with you had nothing to do with data science. Absolutely nothing. Doesn't have anything with recruiting talent in Bucharest or in Kuala Lumpur. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with making sure that our CEO is on task doing everything that, with everything that he is being asked to do, that he's prioritizing things. That's, right? This is one-on-one with you as an individual. And going back to the most disruptive thing of all is to be human. You have to engage people as humans, as individuals. Not as a widget, not as a role or a job description, or somebody to fill a role or a job description. You need to engage them as a person. That's how you're going to get them. There is no secret sauce. The secret sauce, if there is such a thing, it's what you can convey that is meaningful to them as an individual. So, to your question, there is a difference. The way I lead millennials on my team is very different than the way I lead individuals that have hair color more like mine. But it's individual. A broad brush approach isn't going to do it for everybody. I mean, one of the things that is near and dear to my, that's I think is fantastic, is what we do for maternity and paternity leave. 6 months for women, 2 for men. There aren't a lot of companies out there that do that. I'm not going to take advantage of it. But it does resonate with individuals where that might be where they are in life. So we address opportunity in the most human way possible. Thanks for those questions. Any others? Give people the power. Tap into what they know. Organizations that have the highest level of engagement outperform their peers in almost any survey that you see. For those analysts in the room, would you agree? Would you concur?
Yep. The data shows the correlation between employee experience and customer experience.
Absolutely. I did a tour of duty in a prior life in lean consulting, helping organizations align to what is strategically relevant, identifying the value that is derived, and helping them identify and eliminate waste. Depending on what book you read in Lean Land, there are 7 to 8 forms of waste. Those that say that there are 8 say that the most expensive form of waste is the lack of unfulfilled human capacity or talent. So we have people within our organizations. The question is, what are we doing to leverage them? How can you perpetually cultivate cultivation, cross-pollinate, in a way that helps organizations think differently, can turn that prism of reality sufficiently to drive transformational change? Some jobs are going to go away. It will happen. The question is, how does that wisdom that organizations have over, if there's an individual that's been enrolled for 20 years, what insights do they have to make your place a better place to work? And then what commitment do you have? What commitment does your leadership have? What commitment does your team have beyond you to affect that change? Any questions? Yes.
One of the things that I've struggled with IT talent is, there's a lot of people say, okay, where will I be in 2 years? Where will I be in 3 years? What will my job be in 5 years? And you're like, okay, the technology that will define in large part a lot of the jobs 5 years now haven't even been created yet, so I can't tell you that right now, right? Like the whole concept of just being open and adaptable and getting people comfortable with that versus a very scripted way we used to do career path, that you're a business analyst and you go to a senior analyst and you go to an architect or blah, 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 right? That's just long gone. So I was just wondering, like, any advice on how you are working with talent so they get comfortable with the gray space and that they're just going to have to be adaptive and open, right? But they feel like you've given them some type of guardrails about potential career journeys.
That's a fantastic question, and we're actually going through that as well. We just did a Workday implementation, launched it first part of this month, so brand new to us. But I've been part of this before. To move away from performance reviews that are tied to specific roles is perhaps one of the biggest steps that you can take. So when you frame opportunity, it's less about the role and it's more about the impact. What is it that somebody chooses to do professionally? Not job title, but context. So going to the gray that you just talked about, the conversation then becomes around the gray. What impact can they have on that change? What do they see as discernible opportunity that they want to jump on and that they want to help drive? I'd rather be the architect of change than being the recipient of it. And if you could provide that opportunity to them, that much the better. Does that help? Okay. Any other questions? You guys have been fantastic. I think I'm going to borrow some of your stuff for tomorrow. Thank you. Cheers.